Hello and welcome to the Seren Stay-at-Home Series archive. This video features readings from two of our poets. Firstly, Tamar Yoseloff reads from her new collection, The Black Place, followed by Martyn Crucefix reading from The Lovely Disciplines. We hope you enjoy watching it back.
I have to say thank you very much, Sarah, for all the wonderful organization that she has done for the Stay-at-Home series. It's been terrific. It's wonderful to be able to see everybody in these strange times of lockdown. Tonight we have some wonderful poets here. We have Tamar Yoseloff to begin. We were thrilled to publish Tammy's A Formula for Night, new and selected poems a couple of years ago. And then this year, we've got her The Black Place. I'm a big fan. She's published about 6 previous collections. She writes an amazing blog about art and poetry. She is witty. She is from New Jersey. We'll forgive you for that. Now, there are lots of great artists from New Jersey, like Patti Smith and Bruce Springsteen and Diane Arbus. So Tammy joins this distinguished company tonight, which she will be reading, and off she goes. Tammy, welcome.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much for that. And it's lovely to be reading so I'm trying to get my poems up and they're not coming up. There we go. It's lovely to be reading with Martyn as well. The last time Martyn and I read together was at the end of November at Chenner Books in East Dulwich. And while it's nice to be reading with him here tonight, it would be lovely to be together in a wonderful bookshop with an audience, and I hope we can do that again very soon. I thought I would start the reading by reading 3 new poems that I've written since lockdown. This first one's called Half-Life. The ones before us passed this way, each step clogged in mud. Now they're gone, the path pocked with tracks, hardened casts of ghosts. We skulk through lanes and glades, keeping our distance. Distance is all we've got. The space around us haloed, but we're not angels. We lock ourselves in attics, crazy Berthas, crying to the moon, no one around to hear. The streets rewild, creatures come out of hiding while we retreat, our ragged secrets stuck in struts of junked machines. What we've learned of truth and trust isn't enough. There's a shadow we can crawl into, not come out. This next poem is called Heartsease, and heartsease is a kind of wild pansy, and they were at one time used medicinally, and they were also thought to be able to be used as a love potion. Heartsease. Outside they run riot, sprout where they can in the glare of noon. They don't need tending or care, don't care about us when we're down on our luck, little pansy faces giggling. We demand they cure our ills, stir thoughts of love. Enough of them, a fast death once cut. Who wants to be cooped up with their sweet reek, their sentimental pose? They live with or without our passion, find their feast in air, in the new-turned soil on our graves. In concert. We were sitting in a crowded hall waiting for the lights to dim before the halls were emptied. Strangers sharing breath, breathing as one when the music began. How strange to be silent together, listening as sound filled the air. Shallow breathing of a man next to me, deep in concentration, his arm against mine. The intimacy of listening in the dark as time collapsed, his breathing in time with the music. I miss the brush of his arm. It annoyed me then. I miss his breathing, held on a note, waiting for the orchestra to rise, liquid longing of strings, the drums gathering force, horns flash and fade. The bare arms of the violins working as one, girls in black lifting the tune from the score. Music could be conjured by a baton's wave, and we were its conductors. Our bodies pliant in plush seats, absorbing vibrations. All we had to do was allow it to enter. Right, as Amy mentioned, I've had 2 collections now with Seren, and this one, which she held up before, A Formula for Night, is a new and selected. So I thought I would read some poems from this collection first. What I've tried to do tonight is find poems that I feel are kind of speaking to this moment. And it's weird when you go and look at previous poems in the middle of all of this and suddenly think that they're eerily prescient. So this first poem is entitled Mud, and it's after a painting by the British artist Howard Hodgkin, and the title of his painting is also Mud. I see the scuffs and knots and bruises, what a body takes, the sea at night, tarmac road, an obliteration, a mistake. The Japanese master contemplates the landscape from his mountain. I clear the mud from my window, wait for a revelation. The antiseptic tinge of boredom, silt of the airless room. Now it's quiet, the memory of spring behind us. Night's drawing in, the tide is out, so when I walk the edge of the shore, my feet stick fast. What a body needs, the green warmth, someone to hold. This next poem is also inspired partly by a painting, in this case a painting called An Anatomy of Melancholy by the Irish artist Hughie O'Donoghue. And when I first went to see this painting, I thought it looked a little bit like a tornado at the kind of height of its force. And then I think at some point I was reading something about so-called storm chasers, who are people who follow tornadoes around the world and occasionally get sucked up inside one after the storm. At daybreak, cars crept along the main road out of town, luggage racks piled with huddled bundles. Those of us who stayed stockpiled batteries, bottled water, canned beans. The streets emptied of everything but heat. A couple of storm chasers cruised in like they owned the place. One of them would die years later in Texas, the tornado whisking him off the ground like a leaf. When it finally arrived, its black hand tore through whole fields, tossed aside houses and trees, grabbed the sun in its fist. I always believed each morning I'd wake, each day would bring some new joy. I survived, but now fear squats in my heart, ready to fling me to the sky. This next poem, Knotweed, I see as a bit of a companion piece to Heartsease. And I find I write a lot about the natural world taking over from our man-made built world. And so Knotweed, not a particularly romantic or poetic plant, but I did find out that another word for knotweed, which is far more poetic, is fleeceflower. Knotweed. Durable, your rough roots, your troops, your line of destruction that molds its way beneath foundations, it will outlive us. We are coming and going, always lost and losing, in love with the tug of leaving, the future cast upon the shaded map, the Alice universe expanding. All roads are chosen, all roads say, come. Your greedy paws claw all for one, to feed your lust for land, you grab the lot. Fleece flower, the fleet hour of inflorescence bursts, you drape your skirts over the earth, tough penduncle, homunculus. You will not budge, now you've found your calling, the felling of our failing structures. Right, some poems now from The Black Place, which, as Amy mentioned, is my most recent collection. It was published in October, which feels like a very long time ago now. And there are lots of poems in this book that are inspired by is the wrong word, informed by Brexit and the aftermath of the referendum vote. And this next poem, Dawn, was written on the morning after the referendum result. Dawn. The city stirs, planes drown out birds, the fox cries like a strangled child over the uncertain street. Not a soul. Each day I lose more. Words, names, things I thought I cared about. The sun does its duty as it should, but dawn still holds on to night, like a blanket covering a body. Poppies stamp the lawn loud as fists, but their petals are widow's skin. I'll lie down in their red caress, let them stroke my cheek, black eyes winking. This next poem is entitled The Treasury of Alanis, and Alanis was the Roman name of Villa Joyosa, which is near Alicante in Spain. And it's the site of a wreck of a Roman cargo ship, which was carrying hundreds of amphorae full of garum, which was a kind of a fish paste that was exported all over the Roman Empire. And when you go into the local museum in Villa Joyosa, you find all these amphorae that they've pulled from the wreck. The Treasury of Alanis. To pine means to yearn. This is what we do on a hill above the sea where Romans prayed to equinoctial deities. What do we mean when we say we have faith? At the temple site, the ditch fills with plastic bottles, Coke cans, for our descendants to excavate. Will they conclude this was the start of our decline? Divers sweep the sea floor where a merchant ship sank, cargo intact, amphorae packed with garum. We stuff our mouths with baccarones, wipe our salty lips, call the waiter for more wine. To pine is to lament what we don't have, what we lost. Trees cling to the cliff edge, our fingers are sticky with resin. What do we mean when we say we've lost our faith? The goddess could occupy a pocket, fit a hand. Her owner kept her close. Only her head survives. Her hair is waved like the sea. In her glass case, we see our reflection. And in this case, the bones of a soldier, plain as the grave. His remains can tell us how he lived, how he died. Can we excavate his soul? The women wore amulets of gold, element of eternity. To pine is to ache, to waste away. It isn't skin that keeps us whole. This next poem is for my friend Susan in Boston, who's out there somewhere. Yeah, we pretty much lived this. Little black dress. Too tight, too short, it weathered nights on the lash with my broken-spined Plath, my Bacardi and Coke, a classic LBD from Bendel's or Saks, sole owner deceased, her closet dispatched to the charity shop, where we picked over Givenchy like vultures. My wardrobe belonged to the dead, smoking in sharkskin, a boucle vest with leopard lapels that died for my sins, which were minor enough to dress for the part, Rachmaninoff oozing through speakers, the record skipping into dusk, and us, university girls with daddies and trusts, drunk and disorderly, dropping off bar stools one by one, until the time arrives for widow's weeds and weeping veils, Ray-Bans, darkening the sun. This, I think, is self-explanatory. Islanders. We maroon ourselves on tiny plots, worlds shrunk to fit. Our terrain is difficult, our waves choppy. We have few natural resources. We live on what we forage, hoard air and water. We grow turf, hide in the long grass so no one can find us. Develop 1,000-yard stares, our eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a ship that never docks. The off-island, always beyond reach, always in sun, like a gem behind glass. We put seas between us. We won't be rescued. This next poem is in 3 parts, and it's a poem I wrote for a film that was made by the photographer and filmmaker Bill Jackson. It was actually a sequence of films entitled North by East. Dark light. A shooting star makes a sound like a scratch in vinyl, like the night is a record you can play. Some songs only make sense when they stutter on a note. The air is heavy and smells of violets. The sky is a graveyard of stars. My eyes hurt from too much looking. Once I saw the aurora from a dock in Norway. Men were going about their business, hauling great loads from one bay to another. The aurora was nothing to them. It had lost its wonder. It was green and strange. It swayed to an unheard tune. It must be what people see when they think they're haunted, a light that moves like we do, but has no form. When people come back from near death, they talk about a pulsing light at the end of a long hall. I practice my ghost walk for when I need to haunt. I am all soft edges, a silhouette caught on the horizon. 2. The artist waits until the dead hour when his eyes yield to darkness. Only now can he draw, the burden of sight lifted. He rises from sleep, takes a nub of charcoal, firm and dry between his fingers, hears it churr against paper, digs a line into the coarse weave. He wants to be nothing more than motion, not even a hand, something without source. He wants to make a mark that doesn't resemble anything he knows, no word assigned to it. He wants to draw a loss, like a gush of air released through a long unopened door, like the way night sucks shape and color from the chair or rug, even though he knows they're still here. He can't be certain. Things are unmade in darkness. His body has vanished, just ticking organs, a funnel of breath. Walls melt away, the room opens to sky. Faith unravels like a ball of string. 3. I stand inside a pool of streetlight, holding the dark at bay. This must be what it's like to have a god. Sodium casts a sickly yellow on my skin. In the ancient map, there are monsters hugging the places where the maker had no clue, where you might fall off the edge into nowhere. I had a nightlight as a child, a plug-in candle in the corner of my room, but a monster lived behind my eyes, and even though it died each morning, it rose up again at bedtime. Back then, my parents would sing me to sleep. Now they're ash and bone. Our lives are brief, like the banks of candles in cathedrals, each a flame for someone loved, or the light I see framed in curtained windows for each one who's lit a lamp, made a strike against the dark. And I'd like to finish with the title poem from my new and selected, and the cover again. You'll see this is a light sculpture by the artist Carith Wynne Evans on the cover, and it's made up of old-fashioned fluorescent bulbs, and I spent a whole day nearly watching it light up and then dim again, and watching that blue filament kind of just go out as it dimmed. And Carith Wynne Evans is interested in the American poet James Merrill, who wrote an absolutely bonkers 500-page poem called The Changing Light at Sandova, where he experimented with the Ouija board and called loads of people up, including Auden, who basically told him to get lost. And so the poem is partly about the Carith Wynne Evans sculpture, but also about what's on the other side. And thank you everyone for listening. The formula for night. It's getting late. Light floods the public bar. You're the final one to leave. The mirror's silver eye gives you back yourself, precise. You've lived your life through glass. You miss the brush of skin. someone whispering your name. You hear it now, a calling on the wind, insistent, a small but steady flame. You carry in your bones a gasp of summer heat, the formula for night. You arrive at the end of peer reveal, the heart-stop hour, when this world briefly yields to the next. A door that creaks an inch or two to catch a blinding beam. You want to understand what can't be seen, the fact behind the trick, the wires hidden from your view, the blue breath that powers the machine. Raise your eyes to read the stars. Streetlight's glare has cast them dark. Once bright bulbs, trembling elements crack and fizzle as they die. Their light is obsolete. But close your eyes, and still you find gold impressed beneath your lids, a moment lived. And when you open them again, darkness is what's left. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tammy. That was a wonderful reading. So we are going to take a short 5-minute break now for the clap for carers, so that those who would like to take part in that can do. Amy, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, just thank you so much, Tammy, for those darkly gorgeous poems. Wonderful. This gives me a chance to mention something I didn't mention when it comes to Tammy is Hercules Press. So Tammy runs a wonderful little press. They do gorgeous little art books. And Martyn has recently had a Hercules book out, probably just in time for lockdown, sadly. Yeah. But have you got it with you, Martyn? Can you hold a little copy up?
I have it.
Tammy has one. There it is. Cargo of Limbs.
Ah, I got one too.
There we go. I've got one somewhere. Adorable, beautiful little pamphlet.
Beautiful book.
About the migrant crisis. I'm hoping you'll read a bit from that, as well as from your Seren collection, The Lovely Disciplines. Martyn is, of course, a well-known poet. He's originally from Trowbridge. He's got about half a dozen of his own collections. And then he also is a noted translator from the German of Rilke. And also the other German person he recently translated,
Peter Huchel.
Peter Huchel for and is also one of the top 10 poetry blogs in the UK. So always has something interesting to say and interesting ways to say it. So Martyn, please read some of your wonderful poems.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. In fact, I'm not going to read from Cargo of Limbs. That wasn't in the plan. It's a hard one to excerpt from. So I'm going to be reading mostly from The Lovely Disciplines, which was published by Seren in 2017, which is only 3 years ago. But looking at the poems again, trying to decide what to read this evening, they seem to be describing a very different world from the one we're now used to. I agree with Tammy, actually. Reading some of those poems, there was an added kind of poignancy almost, given the conditions we're now living in. Two things really struck me. One was a number of the poems were describing things that most of us have not really been able to do in the last couple of months. So simple things like getting up and going to work, traveling, visiting friends and family and so on, shopping, getting a haircut, all those things. So the one or two poems I'll start with in that kind of context. The other thing about the book is that I remember Amy saying, it's quite a dark book, isn't it? And the reason for that is there are a number of poems which are concerned with my parents, who in the years leading up to the publication of the book were approaching, what do we call it, kind of end-of-life situations. So I'll read a number of those as well. For personal reasons, of course, my dad would have been 100 this year. But also to try and reflect, I suppose, something of the current situation, the volume, if you like, of grief and loss that the country, the whole world has been suffering. I think sometimes the detail, perhaps, of some of those griefs, the individuality of it, can get lost in the kind of statistics and graphs that we're fed on a daily basis. So in our house, as I say, one of the things that has not been happening recently is somebody getting up bright and early, possibly bushy-tailed, and heading off to work. So this poem is called Obad, which is a dawn song or a dawn poem, and that's the context. Those listening closely will notice a brief borrowing from Neil Young halfway through. Obad. You reverse the type. You relinquish me. The man turns back to the warmth of pillows, to the shrinking hearth of his lover's gone heat. The front door below swings open and shut. I listen to your shoes where they crack stones along the front path. The car lock shot back, and vividly I see how you approach, right hand outstretched. The engine's note whines and dwindles, unpicking our warmth, where you've woken to worlds of fact, of metal and time, where friction wears, where rust never sleeps, where 3 follows 2, where our lips let slip, where cursors blink into day's brute dawn. As with this one's alarm, this brash disarray of moments to come, bringing the taste of coin and keys to my tongue. I've mentioned the barbers, no dentists and no opticians, of course. The optician always strikes me as one of the most intimate experiences, and obviously that's been avoided completely in recent months. So this is a poem called ROMJX, which I'm imagining as one of those lines you read, checking your eyesight. She asks, is it better with or better without? Her glass in his eyes like sweets in his mouth. The woman moving in a dim-lit room, barely visible, yet she insists on breathing through the long defense of his privacy. How he loves it when she blows air in his eye. Happy when he's asked to concentrate on the balloon she conjures on a glass screen. Its vivid reds above the white stripe of road set him dreaming of imagined Americas. Murmuring in pastel shades now, she crowds, voices pleasure, whether he's right or wrong, wants him to spell out her strange words. Though this morning, she does not ask him to number the white streak of falling stars. To his disappointment has no reason to gentle his head into the rubber clamps, though he submits to the dazzling of her lamp. Is it the red? She asks. Is it the red or the green? Oh, how he loves her vocabulary of absolutes. One of the things we've all been missing, I guess, is a bit of retail therapy. Bookshops mostly for me, second-hand bookshops especially for me. And this poem arose from a second-hand book I bought, and I have got it here somewhere. I can show it's this one here. It's mentioned in the poem. But what I found inside the book, I found interesting, and it kind of sparked this sort of fantasy, if you like, imagining what the backstory of this curious item would have been. So this is a poem called As We Live. In this second-hand copy of Mary Oliver's Swan, I discover a year-old ATM receipt. And though I've never banked with NatWest, It tells me there is a balance of 36,345. The slip of paper suggests I turn it over. And beside the key to its cryptic codings, I find scrawled crisps, frankfurters, cherries, prawnies, soup. After the hole in the wall, did she jot this list, perhaps over coffee? The quiet reading of Swan, though the spine of the book is barely creased, so perhaps she did not take to its leaves, its foxes, bears, birds, its nod to Emerson, we only believe as deep as we live. But she drifted to devise a meal of frankfurters and cherries, to ponder her use of the diminutive, her childhood self weirdly naked in the slip of the pen in prawnies. For that moment, visible above the well-defended parapets of wife and mother and salaried worker, a little match flicker of identification, the ripple and pulse of dumb, invertebrate life that may or may not have been rapidly snuffed. The other thing, reading through these poems, it struck me fairly forcibly. I think a lot of us tend to write when we're away from home, traveling, sightseeing, and so on. So this is a poem on such an occasion. And what we have here is a father, me, and a daughter visiting a church. And I suspect, I don't really remember it to be honest, but I suspect this was a church in France. So this is Night Lights. Once inside, she asks to light a candle. And though they're meant for prayer, I whisper, there's no problem, just as long as she can make a wish, as she might come March for her 7th birthday, if with a bit more reverence, though that's not exactly what I say. But we can't find a spill to bring the flame, and they're not real candles anyway. In her little daunted hands, she finds the tiny night lights, too fiddly to kindle one from another. So I take the lead, without thinking, ease her gently aside, steadying a night light in each hand. This one, held up, dark and unlit. This one, already brightly trembling. As if I've a firm grip at last on the great dualities she begins to divine. Yet edging them closer, the flame shrugs and promptly gutters, starved of air, of course. And so we laugh, but then hush, with the shock of having snuffed out someone else's fervent prayer with our attempt to light our own. And not only because hers must be the more light-hearted one. We each feel everything here has weight. As we're doing now, the lockdown has forced us to communicate in all these different ways, mostly Zoom. It's an interesting article in The Guardian today about Zoom, the good and the bad, but at least we can come together in this fashion. A few years back, though, feels like the prehistoric age. In communicating with my parents, we would Skype. We'd bought them a laptop to enable this. They always struggled with the technology, as you'll hear in a moment. But I think they valued it hugely, particularly my father, who by that stage was growing deaf and more and more forgetful. The Spitfire Image, which opens this poem, I've actually dug it out. It is over my right shoulder there on the shelf. You probably can't see it. Dad worked on Spitfires. He didn't fly them, but he serviced them. Spits and hurries, he would call them Spitfires and Hurricanes, and that was one of his prized possessions now in my possession. So this is just called Skype. Over the patchwork levels of eastern England, that familiar image of a banking Spitfire beyond their shoulders. Between them it roars as the war bound them 60 years together, loving to talk, though struggling still to unmute, to get the camera going. Yet it's better this way, since he sees who's talking more easily. He can be more involved, though sometimes the laptop screen is angled so I catch only the crowns of grey heads. Then a giant hand reaches forward to readjust, reappears, holding the Wiltshire Times, its crashes and floods and marriages. And something else, too blurred, even if the connection holds. But if it wavers, faces split to stained glass, or cubist fragments, or fairground mirrors, still talking, blithely asking me still, if I can see these crocuses, the lawn in sunshine, their bird table where sparrows in pairs come for food and drink. As I say, Dad was growing confused, and that progressed as the years went by, really. But it had been a number of years since he'd been able to drive his beloved car. So this next poem is something of a fantasy, a dream poem, perhaps, about being driven by him. And we are moving through the landscape of my hometown, Trowbridge in Wiltshire. It's called the Toll Cottage, and this was a toll cottage on the outskirts of town that must have been used as a toll in the old days, now long disused, but we always knew it by that name. The Toll Cottage. Dad and I are driving out of Trowbridge. He's at the wheel, having come up Timbrel Street, along Islington, with nothing amiss. But as we turn to take the next incline up beyond the thatched Toll Cottage, I glance to my right, past his concentrating head, and to my surprise, see green space, where there should be nothing but suburban brick. A green valley slipping down and away towards a distinct hill, punctuated by dark trees and straight runs of hedges, or perhaps at this distance are they impossible vines. And my sole thought is to rationalize. My hometown landscape changed again, but already we're climbing past the toll at the top of the incline to hit the brow of the hill with that lightning, that little hoopla stir in our bellies as the mass of our bodies continues to rise while the weight of the car hugs the earth and we lift in consequence from our seats only to be set down. Now we rumble along a grassy ridge and the road has vanished to open sky, though there are signs still declaring Coventry or Daventry. It's impossible to make them out. And Dad at the wheel has not missed a beat, though it's 15 years since he was street legal. And in alarm I turn, saying, "This is bad. Look, this is really bad." But he has dealt with our translation more easily than his son. Just read two more poems. My father, as the saying goes, was tough as old boots. He had all kinds of medical issues. One of those was a stroke, from which he eventually recovered. But I remember visiting him in hospital in Bath on the stroke ward. So the details in this next poem are kind of drawn from that, but the biographical situation has been almost completely submerged, I think. So I'd like to read this as a sort of in memoriam, as it were, for the many lives cut short in recent months, and for the grief of their families. So this is the title poem in the book. It's The Lovely Disciplines. See Ginny's son and Ginny's daughter-in-law rest useless hands on the raised bed rail, stare down to where Ginny writhes and squirms, her slender left arm reaching, oh, so high, while her bare right calf lies crooked across the cold retaining bar. As Lucky Jane all day scuts with her bird-like legs folded under to clear the turning wheels of her chair, while she roams the ward, her working shoulders pump and shove, as if she'd tear herself from the purple seat, while Michaela's throat goes sucking great holes in the hospital air, rubbing itself raw, till she's like a bull seal honking on a distant shore she might once have defended, open-eyed, though none here believes Michaela will stir. No brighter hope anymore for Linda, where she's settled still in her pink dressing gown beside her bed, neat as a serviette, her eyes fixed on a man from her V of hands, while he stares at her from his V of hands, at the woman he moved coterminous with for years, who now prefers distance and darkness and being dumb. Oh, no more those lovely disciplines. We reassure ourselves it's human to pursue. And no more those sweet acts of will we briefly treasure or take for granted, consoling ourselves that we will be spared the horror of long blue rooms like these, the slack and supine, and all this twaddle of decay, and so persuade ourselves that the truth need not be so bleak as it seems for these who hold the floor today, who turn hardly more than a leaf turns in being blown to the gutter, those who seem as nothing to themselves, as if more to others, who come with names they won't let go, murmuring Ginny, Michaela, darling Linda, Jane. And I'll finish with a new poem. I think there's a little more light in this one. It's in fact a version of the classic Chinese poet Li Po. His poem was titled, as many of these Chinese poems are, beautifully, Coming Down from Chungnang Mountain by Huzu's Hermitage. I think it's a happy poem. There is light and shade, there is isolation, but there is the value of companionship as well, and that feels about right for where we are. So this is my last poem. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Sarah and Amy for making all this happen. So my last poem, Descent from White Hill. Come down at dusk from the mountain passes, a mountain moon, my sole companion. Glance over my shoulder at the path taken, hardly a gleam of blue under the skyline, a threadbare blue. But you grasp my hand on the last incline, lead me to your house, where there are children, quick to draw down rose bloom blinds against the running briar. We eat frugally, then we each carry uncertain candles into the damp backyard, where whips of new growth honeysuckle stoop low to bless the traveller's head. Such pleasure in a place of peacefulness. You bring out red wine, you pour it freely. We each take turns singing to the breeze as it finds its way through the silver birch. Till our songs are done, the Milky Way pales, and I am drunk, though no more than you. And there is nothing, we know, left to spoil our brief forgetfulness of that other world. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Martyn. That was wonderful. Thank you to both Tammy and Martyn for joining us this evening. Amy, did you want to say anything?
Briefly. Thank you so much, Martyn and Tammy. What beautiful poems full of intimacy and human qualities that we've had here at dusk. Thank you all so much for coming along.